feel you've seen the biggest improvements over the course of the past couple of weeks over on the special team side?
I think in our coverage units is probably the biggest improvement we've made. I think those guys have done a good job both on punt coverage and limiting the amount of return yards. Right. I thought they've done a good job there, and that ties into everything. The protection, and then the punter hitting the ball, putting it where we need it to be, and then those guys getting out and covering. And then I think we've made some pretty good improvements in our kickoff coverage as well. So I'm pleased. The guys are working extremely hard at it. We put a huge emphasis on it, and they're seeing the results and having fun while we're doing it. So I think that's where we've made the biggest improvements.
Well, we've seen this year already the Rams special teams, particularly the field goal side of things, a couple of kicks blocked.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about sort of looking at that in the past and understanding that they're making adjustments? Like, what's the negotiation of looking at those issues?
Yeah, I think it's like every week you try to game plan and see, okay, where do you maybe see a deficiency here or there in your opponent, and then you try to go attack that. And like you said, they see the same thing. So they've had some personnel changes of people that have been on the field goal protection unit for them. And so I think you just try to each week see, okay, can we target who maybe the weak or two weaker links are that we want to go after and go attack. And so that's kind of what we take in each phase.
Surprised you at all to see Stalbird getting some run on defense? Some of those situations there?
No. You know what? I think that I think it's it's really good by our defensive coaching staff, and being able to see what he does well and take advantage of those abilities that he has on specific roles on third down. So that.
Is it cool for you to see a guy who kind of like has to grind his way onto a roster, get opportunities like that?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's really cool to see that. I think there's a lot of guys throughout our organization, that goes with, and you kind of take pride in that. Like I look at Isaiah, for example. Last season, he started on the practice squad, right, and then got a chance to get elevated, and then played towards the end of the year. But when you go back and you look, like I think he only played like 80 special team snaps last season, right, and so he's already way past that this year. And so it's an adjustment for him as well. It's kind of like he's not a rookie, but is it a rookie wall that he has to be able to fight through because he's playing so many more plays on special teams now, and teams are starting to notice, some of the good things that he's doing, and maybe he's getting double teamed sometimes and stuff like that. And now you're increasing his role of what he has to do, what he's doing on defense. So it's an adjustment for him as well. But there's a bunch of guys, really, when you look back on our roster of guys that we've kind of targeted, like, you go all the way back to like a Juwan Johnson, for example, who was an undrafted free agent. And, obviously I had Juwan at Penn State, and I actually recruited Juwan's older brother, George, who played here, to play for me at Rutgers. So I go way back with him, and he was an undrafted guy that we targeted, or, Rashid Shaheed, or, there's some guys that have made their way because of starting on special teams and then really developed into becoming very, very good defensive players. So it's something that, I'm excited for those guys, and it's a good and bad, right? Because you hate losing some of the snaps that you're getting. Juwan was a guy who played kickoff and kickoff return for us early in his career and really did a good job, and now you don't have that body out there doing it, but he's doing what he needs to do on offense.
How do special teams help a player develop into the next role? With Juwan, or Brandon's mentioned it with Quincy Riley, they felt comfortable using him on defense because of what he showed on special teams. How does special teams kind of prepare?
Yeah, Liz, I think it's a great question. I think that there's two-part answer to that. I think the first part is a lot of the younger guys get their start on special teams, so they have the ability to get recognized by the other coaches because of the success that they're having on the special team standpoint, right? And then I think a lot of the work you do in spring and you do in training camp, like all of our drill work that we do special teams wise, there's fundamentals that are taught, whether it's in coverage, something as simple as like inside and in front, and keeping the ball inside of you and keeping it in front of you, or block destruction, right? Or when you flip it around and you go to the return game of the holdups and punt return, or the front line blocking in KOR, those guys are using the same skills when they go over to offense, defense. They may be called a different name, or there may be slightly different. There's not as much space, but there's a lot of carryover between that. And even it's funny when you look at the special teams drills we do, and then you go and you watch O&D individual work. There's so many similarities in the game, whether it's offense, defense, or special teams.
Does the kickoff rule change help that when it comes to younger players trying to develop as blockers?
I don't know the answer to that. I think the new kickoff rule is it has to happen sooner, whereas in the old kickoff rule, they were going backwards to then get set up and then come forward. So I think that it's helped some of the bigger bodies with the new kickoff rule because they don't have to run when you used to be lined up on the 50 and run back, whatever it was, 20 yards or 25 yards. Now you're just 5 yards away, so it eliminates that running part for some of the, the linebacker or tight end body types that allows them to be more efficient in it.
Does that make, a tight end, for instance, in that situation that's blocking, not having to run back and reset, does that make it feel a little bit more like what you would do on offense?
Yeah, I think so, yes. And I think it puts them in less space, which allows them to be more comfortable, especially if they get matched up with like a speed guy, right, with a safety or a corner or something like that who has good speed. There's not as much room for that guy to be able to wiggle and avoid and make a miss. He's on them right now.
There were a couple of drives that kind of ended on the fringe of field goal range and off the punt both times. What's kind of the conversation that goes into, hey, are we going to attempt a long field goal here versus are we going to punt when it's like the 41?
Yeah, I think where you're at in the game is the biggest thing. And, and I've had that conversation. We've had that conversation, whether it is with Blake or whether it was Will before that, it's not that we don't have confidence in you that you can make a 59-yard field goal, but if you miss a 59-yard field goal, they get the ball on the 49-yard line and they're one completion away, and now they're in scoring range. So how's the game going, and as far as like how's the offense moving the ball, how's the defense playing, where are we at in the game? Like one of the things is you really would rather not open up the first drive and have to attempt a 59-yard field goal, and now if you don't make it, the other team's offense is set up right at midfield and in scoring range already. So I think it's just where you're at in the game, how's the game flow going, and that sort of deal. Not as much as much to do about do you think the kicker can make it or not.
Is there a similar negotiation on short field goals? Like you take a short field goal, but then you kick off, they get the ball to 35, you're a couple first downs away from them being in field goal range, whereas if you go for it on fourth down, they have a longer distance to drive if you don't make it. Is that the negotiation that you sometimes find even in short field goal situations? Yeah,
I think that's a fair point. And again, to me, it goes back to, is the score 28-24 or is the score 6-3? And how valuable are the points? Are always valuable, but what type of game are you in that situation? And and then what is the fourth down distance, right? Is it how manageable? What does the analytics say? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, or is it 8, 9, 10? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different factors that go in. You kind of try to talk about throughout the drive, and then you have to just make a quick decision. All set? Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.